Welcome to Plot Twist Radio, the show where creativity, storytelling, and the unpredictable path of the creative life all collide. I'm your host, Erin Egnatz. Today's guest brings us a story that started exactly the way childhood creativity does, with a simple doodle. Susan K. Fairchild is a lifelong artist and a debut author of The Turkey Hands, a children's book that was born not from a sentence or a scene, but from a traced hand that suddenly came alive on the page. From that one sketch grew a joyful, mischievous story about play, imagination, and the power kids have when they're encouraged to create. Her journey reminds us that art isn't just something we look at, it's something we listen to. It's the spark that nudges us towards storytelling, whether we're 6 years old with crayons or adults rediscovering our creativity. Hailing from the Texas Panhandle and now living in New York City, Susan has spent her career supporting education through nonprofit work. Today, we'll talk about how a spontaneous doodle became a fully illustrated children's book, the crossover between visual and written storytelling, the freedom and vulnerability of indie publishing, and the childlike joy that fuels her creativity. Susan K. Fairchild, welcome to Plot Twist Radio. Well, Susan, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here, Erin.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have spent the vast majority of my career doing educational research. So I've tended to focus on data and looking for patterns in data. And I have also always had this long passion with art. And I was raised by a first grade teacher. So I have been exposed to just some incredibly curated children's books, children's art, all of that great stuff. So my mom really cultivated this deep love of children's books and generally just reading.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's start at the beginning. Can you take us back to the moment when traced hand became the seed of an entire story?
Well, You know, I don't know if there's necessarily a specific origin point for these turkey hands. All I can tell you is that I have been with me for really over sort of the past 30 years. And it really wasn't until COVID that I decided, it was just time for me to unleash them. And for a long time, I was really stuck with how to represent the main character, the turkey hands themselves. And, just a simple traced hand, it just wasn't going to capture the spirit of these guys in any way that really did them justice. They're mischievous, have a wild streak in them. And all of these early attempts really, they just fell flat. And it was just too conventional. It was just too boring, all of these early efforts. And my mom, she's been gone for about 20 years, but that has hardly stopped me from having these ongoing conversations with her. And one day I was walking along the Hudson River and I was really sort of despairing. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get this right. I can't figure out these birds. And then out of nowhere, this crow, this black crow, swoops down at me. And if I didn't duck, I'm pretty sure that crow would have struck me in the head. And in that moment, I just thought, hot damn, that's them. The turkey hands, they aren't these cute little cutouts. They're more like crows, sort of clever, chaotic, a little bit irreverent. And then once I understood that, things fell into place. So I would say that's sort of part one of sort of where this story has come from. But that's really only half the story. I mean, another really big part of what makes this book meaningful to me has been the collaboration with my close friend Camille Easton. She's my partner in Turkey Hand Press. She owns AO5 Gallery. So to have an opportunity to work with a woman who looks at art every single day is really just sort of this extraordinary gift. And she also comes from a publishing family. So she really understands what it takes to get a book from, I've got this idea, I've got this doodle, to something that's really ready for readers and something that you feel good about, like putting in the hands of others. So she helped sharpen the illustration, she helped tighten the story itself, and really got it to a place where the two of us feel really good about it.
Very cool. It's so good to have someone in the industry because it is one of the hardest ones to break into. And if you try and go in, I tried at first to do a self-publishing thing and I was lost. you get lost in the weeds. So having someone like that had to be just a huge boon for you.
I mean, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Working with her is what has really transformed the turkey hands from a story that I carried around for decades. I mean, this story basically haunted me for all of these years into a book that is now on Amazon, right? And it's got a level of quality for an independent book that I feel really proud of.
That's that's awesome. That's what I love to hear. I think for most authors, it's just, the process is rough, but once you get there, it's so rewarding.
Well, and you've learned so much along the way. And I think, Erin, one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that the quality of the book itself has given us a little bit of cushion in terms of like as first time indie sort of publishers, of course we're going to make mistakes. And you don't know what you don't know until you've 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 seen it through, fully through with one book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a trial, but it's a fun one, sort of. After you're through it, it's fun.
When you're through it, that's when you're like, "Oh, wish I had done that differently."
Yes, absolutely. So many adults lose the instinct to doodle or to even play around. What was it like reconnecting with that childlike creative spark when you were making this book?
Again, a big part of my job is educational research. Every day I'm looking at data. I'm trying to sort of understand sort of what is it that makes a school effective? What are those enabling conditions? And it's important, I think, for adults to find balance in their world. And
Yes.
for me, balance really is through art. It is whether it is going to a museum, whether it is listening to some really awesome music and going out and seeing a show, or it is just sitting there and making the time in your life to sort of push your edges a little bit further. Going from sort of the small routine world that oftentimes we find ourselves in to what are those things that are going to help us find the space and to expand our world just a little bit. And for me, art is what does that. And when I first started this work, I was drawing on construction paper. And then all of a sudden, you've got some of these really amazing digital tools. And to be able to like take that idea of constructing and collage and using a digital platform to be able to do some of that is super awesome. And at the same time, I'm in New York City, so I have access to just so many outlets. And I work with this one print house, the Lower East Side print shop, and I do a lot of screen printing with them. And it's also really important to continue to like use your hands to actually make things and to be able to express, for me, to be able to express myself through means that are literally allow me to get my hands dirty.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's move on to the art itself. Children's books rely heavily, of course, on the relationship between the picture and the text. How do you decide what the art says versus what the words say?
Well, you'll notice that the art is pretty minimalist. And and like I mentioned, it took a long time to get the main character just right. That a typical turkey hand that you see, that we all see, was not going to be able to carry the story. That the story just had, I think, a little bit too much out of the norm. That flat turkey hand wasn't going to be able to express what the story needed to express. So that was one big challenge that I had to sort of address. But then it's like, I have a lot of respect for kids. I think less is more. I think kids are so smart. They know how to fill in the blanks and they want to be able to fill in the blanks. And so that was, I think, a really big part of setting this book up. And just because it is simple and the art is a little bit simple, sometimes when you've got less on the page, you see each object a little bit more clearly, which is great, but there's no place to hide, right? Because then if you've made an error, everybody can see it. So I think like one of my favorite artists is Carmen Herrera. There are these big geometric patterns that she has screen printed, and they look so easy. And then one day I thought, why don't I just like replicate this on a wall? And so I just started painting on the wall, and I was so humbled by every single error that was obvious to me and anybody else who looked at it. And I kept it. I kept that very flawed Carmen Herrera replica on the wall as a reminder that just because something looks so simple, um, don't kid yourself. It is actually harder than it looks.
I believe that I cannot do any art. I've always been so fascinated by it, and I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, but I cannot do it. But so I when I meet an artist, I kind of go overboard with it because I'm like, "Oh, how do you do this? How do you do this?" That's just one thing I could never do, but I just appreciate it so much. I have it all throughout my house. I love it. I agree with the more simplistic like you were saying. I think that a lot of times those tell more stories in a way.
Well, I think the kids have the ability, like I was saying, to they're hearing the words, but then they're also able to fill in some of the details. And I think that, it's a stylistic preference of mine. And I also think that when you're in the process of doing the art for a children's book, in addition to thinking about sort of the main reader, the child, you're also having to think about the parent and how sometimes with empty space, it can spark a conversation between a mom and a child or a dad and it or a teacher and a kid. So uh, again, I think that allowing there to be space creates conversation.
Very good. Let's go on to the themes and the impact of the story because every story has an impact. I told you my son, he loved it and he just gravitated right to it, which is for him a surprise because he just doesn't read. We've tried and we've tried, but he saw this on the table and he was like, "Ooh, the turkey." And then he just sat down and started reading it. And it actually counted towards his AR goal for school. He found it very engaging. And I sat there with him and we had that mother-son kind of story time and I just loved it. It's a joyful story, but it's also an agency and imagination. What do you hope kids take away from the story?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a few different entry points in it. So first of all, it's a classic take on sort of a Thanksgiving activity, right? So already it's pretty accessible. Like tracing your hand to make a turkey. I think a lot of parents have done that, and so there's something sort of nostalgia about that. But I also think that there's a real surprise in the story. So these paper cutouts, they come to life when the teacher leaves, right? And they create a mess, they get into all sorts of things that they probably shouldn't be getting into. But it's that climax when they're discovering the shocking surprise that it's this moment in the book when they just lose their minds. They just quickly clean up and they suddenly like fly right. But it's that surprise that's such a great turning point because it is ridiculous, but it's also sort of existential at the same time. It's this moment in the story where all of this sort of chaos comes to this screeching halt, and it creates some space for the turkey hands to be just a little bit more reflective. And that moment creates this pivot from mischief to responsibility. It's funny, but it's also got that emotional hinge to it. So on the surface, it's silly and playful, but underneath, it's really about hands as an extension of children's themselves. Like as a parent, you probably know that hands are sometimes some of the first things that adults try and control. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't touch that. I mean, I know as a child, I would get into everything, and that was just the constant chorus in my life. But hands are also how kids express curiosity and creativity. And I think that the turkey hands do a nice job of sort of capturing that tension. They start out as sort of just pure mischief and chaos and end up, choosing responsibility. And it's that pivot, it's that turn from making a mess to figuring out how they need to make it right. For me, that's where the story lives. It's about agency, like you said, about this idea that even the most unruly energy can still be redirected into doing good. And it's sort of this gentle way of showing that kids learn responsibility not just by being told what to do, but also by experiencing cause and effect. So I I think that there are a lot of different entry points into this story and some sweet but not sort of heavy-handed lessons.
So, would that be what you consider your favorite part, kind of that turning point, or is there a different part of the book that's your favorite?
I would have to say that what I love the most about the story are the turkey hens themselves. And so every single page with them on it, it personally just delights me. I think they are so expressive. They are subjects that I want to continue to get to know. They are so dear and so sweet and so crazy. And for me, they are to Thanksgiving what elves are to Christmas. They just embody something that I know that I never really saw in a Thanksgiving book. So I guess just the sheer effort that it took to figure out who they are for me is what makes this book special. Because again, it's been a long time in the making. It's been a labor of love.
Love that. Have children responded to your book in ways that surprised you or delighted you?
I mean, just the fact that my friends will send me their kids reading the book. I One of my friends, her son now wants to be an artist and an illustrator, which I think is so cool. And he's like, "When's the next one coming out?" And just when a child picks that book to go on a family vacation, that's what more is there? That's just awesome. It's the best feeling to know that, when you open it up and get into it, there's something about it the kids enjoy.
What was the most vulnerable part? Because every author has the vulnerable part where you're thinking, oh, I don't know. But what was that part for you as far as the whole production? Was it the publishing part? Was it the writing and illustrating part?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Erin. I mean, for me, it's just much easier. Give me a story, and I can probably like figure out sort of how to map the art to it. But this was both writing it and illustrating it, and it's also rhyme. And again, I deal with numbers and data and research. So for my brain to suddenly like switch over into rhyme, that was hard. And I had to take a class on rhyme. And even though this is 30 years in the making, I still had a lot to learn about really good rhyme. And so I would have to say that really a tight story was the single hardest part for me. And we have another one that's coming out, and it was again more rhyme. And when I read really good rhyming books, boy, that is difficult to do. And I'm super impressed when there are artists out there who know how to do it really well.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be very difficult. I've never actually tried it, but I love to read it. But yeah, I could see where that would be very, very difficult because, especially with a children's book, so you're kind of limited on what you could rhyme. So
Yeah. And it's like you gotta write the story out first, and then you've got to figure out like you're not writing the story around what rhymes and what doesn't rhyme. But sometimes that's tempting. And there was also, I had the benefit because I am also the illustrator. Like when I just could not do the art that was connected to whatever rhyme that was, I could change it. And
that's a
that
good point.
that came in handy.
So now that you brought the first book out, you kind of alluded to it. Is there a follow-up or like a different kind that you're going for?
Yeah, so there's going to be a sequel to this one, and I'm working really closely with Camille on it. And going forward, it is a we're in it together. And like I said, I care a lot about these little creatures, and I think I know that I have read sequels that aren't as good as the first one. Personally, this one I think is better than the first one. But I also don't want to get into a place where I have to write these books just because, oh, write another turkey hand book. If the story's not there, the quality of the art's not going to be there. And so it's just, I want to make sure that there's always really high quality and that it's additive, that it again is continuing to show these little guys in the right light.
So, if young Susan met the turkey hands, what do you think she'd say?
Oh my gosh, she would be so in love with them. So in love. And that I think is what I have also loved about this. It continues to connect me to that sort of inner small child. And I just love these turkey hens. I mean, I think they're adorable.
They are. They
Yes.
are.
It's like I would go to bed every night with a Snoopy and a Woodstock, and if there had been a stuffed turkey hen, I would have totally gone to sleep right next to the turkey hen, no question.
That I love that. They're so cute. They really are so cute. So where can my listeners find you? Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, socials?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon, and you could also get it from Ingram Spark, and then you can also get it from AO5 Gallery, and I am on Susan K. Fairchild at Instagram.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've loved talking with you and I loved your stories and I'm going to be looking forward to the sequel. I know my son definitely will be.
Thanks so much, Erin. Again, I really appreciate the fact that you've taken some time out for a first-time writer, illustrator. I really am truly grateful.
Thank you, Susan K. Fairchild, for a magical conversation. Today's conversation is a reminder that stories don't always begin with a blank page. Sometimes they start with a doodle, a traced hand, or a moment of play we almost talked ourselves out of. The turkey hands is proof that creativity is still waiting for us, especially when we give ourselves permission to pick up a pencil and see what happens. If today's episode sparks something in you, follow that spark, because the next story might already be right at your fingertips. Until next time, I'm Erin Egnatz, and this is Plot Twist Radio.